there's how you feel towards the other person.
Yes.
There's how they feel towards you. But then there's an arrow that comes back to you, which is how you feel about how they feel. And then they have an arrow of how they feel about how you feel, right? This is why if someone else is moody or somebody else is upset, there's one version of ourselves where we respond to that, or they respond to us. But there's another version where we respond to that, but it's also, there's a processing of what it means for us that they're behaving that way or feeling that way. And this, again, leads us back to that early attachment circuitry, because if a parent was stressed, the child's role is not to soothe the parent. In fact, healthy models of parenting say that children shouldn't actually know how their parents feel for like the first 8 years of their life. They're not supposed to be in that mindset of empathizing for the parent. This is often not the case. And maybe the cutoff isn't exactly 8, but you get the idea. So the dynamics of a relationship are where the learning is, because we learn how we react to other people reacting. It's not just a 2-arrow system. It's at least this 4-arrow thing. But there's also the element of nurturing, right? I mean, I think that going through life with somebody is so much better than going through it alone. And I never thought I'd make that statement. When people say relationship is hard, the only really hard part of a good relationship is just dealing with oneself and making sure that you're staying in that mode of caretaking. Because I do believe that if one is mainly focused on taking good care of the other person, provided they're also focused on taking good care of you to some extent, and we're good at taking care of ourselves, everybody flourishes, everything gets better. But no, I don't think I experienced that until fairly recently. Don't expect looking to anything external to soothe yourself, is it puts you in a terrible position to be a caretaker of yourself and other people, right? So learn how to self-soothe, right? Learn how to calm your mind, steady your actions, steady your voice. There are tools to do that. We talk about on the podcast, but elsewhere, have that in place. I also think that if your main focus is on, you want to have good boundaries, etc., but on tending to the relationship, doing a little bit more than you think you ought to do, if everyone does that, it goes great. I mean, I'm sometimes so positively struck by how supported I feel, because for many years I was just kind of doing everything on my own. So any little thing, I'm like, oh my goodness, this feels huge. And also I think the dynamics have to be right. Let's be really honest. This is a little bit of a tricky topic, but there is a power dynamic in relationships. Sometimes, not all, but in some relationships, it works much better if one person leads and the other person follows. In other relationships, it's more mutuality, works best. People need to know what they need. And so knowing what you need and what you crave is really important. And then once you do that, you can create the relationship you want. I've seen that over and over again. And people are different. But I think that ultimately, I mean, right, there's the dopamine phase of a relationship, and then there's the serotonin phase, the kind of more mutuality, coziness, and sweetness. There's a great book about how to make sure that the dopamine component and the serotonin component, so to speak, go on forever. And it has to do with, when you first meet someone and you're attracted to them, you're essentially objectifying them. Meaning, not in the way people might think, you are not dependent on them for emotional stability or survival. As you get close with somebody, you really come to depend on them, and then you tend to objectify them less. And so this book, the name is kind of corny, but it's written by an analyst again. It's called Can Love Last? And it's a book about how really good, strong relationships are the consequence of people constantly moving through this dependency objectification dynamic. And I use those words in the true the psychological sense, not in the way they're typically thrown around nowadays. So the idea, in some cultures, men and women will only touch for 2 weeks out of the month. And then for the other 2 weeks, the excitement and the sensuality and the sexuality is very heightened. And then they go back to this kind of distancing. Now, I don't think that's feasible for most people, but if you look statistically, those relationships tend to last a very long time with at least reported mutual feelings of intense attraction for many, many, many decades. So human beings need to learn how to at least understand and control these dynamics. And there's a lot of divorce, there's a lot of cheating, there's a lot of stuff out there. It'd be great if people could resolve some of this stuff inside of the relationship, in my opinion, right? If you ask somebody how they really feel about something about you, and they tell you, that may be soothing, it may be intensely stressful. You have to be Here's one thing I know for sure. For a relationship to work, you have to be brave. You can't go in there fully protected. And yet you also can't go in there with no boundaries, because you'll end up beat up. What's that quote? If you want to be a warrior, prepare to get hurt. If you want to be an explorer, prepare to get lost. And if you want to be both, and if you become a lover, prepare to be both, or something like that. I forget. This is one of these Instagram type things that you see passing by, and you go, oh, it's pretty true. Love's scary, because it takes us back to that primitive circuitry that is as primitive and basic as hunger, thirst, the desire for heat when we're cold, the desire for cold when we're overly warm. It's dynorphin. I mean, when somebody leaves, like when somebody you were attached to leaves by death or by decision, or you're forced apart, the dynorphin release is massive. It is true discomfort. People feel anxiety and discomfort. And moving through that is the hell of a process. I mean, if I knew how to best break up at a neurological level, or if you could just plug yourself into a wall and reset, life is finite. It is beautiful to see these couples that seem very much in love, despite having been together many years. And they'll say, we got lucky, or it's been hard, or this and that. I think external conditions being a little tougher is helpful for a couple. Because I think that you rally, you bond with people, obviously you want to survive those conditions, but yeah, I do. Normally, it's interesting. Normally, sociopaths don't team up because they manipulate each other. Sociopaths, sadly, are usually only interested in manipulating the highly pliable or unsuspecting. But when romantic attraction is woven in, then it gets really diabolical. Yeah, actually, this comes from a friend of mine who's in a really excellent marriage with great kids and family and high demand life. It's a decision. Like, at some point you just prioritize it as, okay, I'm going to make this happen one way or another. And you don't force the discovery of that person. But I mean, I've occasionally said, hey, I think you should meet this person or that person. And well, it wasn't, maybe my judgment might have been off, but the timing wasn't right or something. But I think that, yeah, it's a decision. And it also has to do with life structure. I mean, there were years, when I was in graduate school, I didn't want a girlfriend. I just wanted to be in lab, and I had romantic dating interests, but I wasn't going to meet them through a committed, live together situation. It wasn't where I was at. And as a postdoc, things are a little different, et cetera, et cetera. So, but at some point, it's sort of like, what do I want my daily routine to look like? Because ultimately, a relationship, however one structures it, is going to be part of your daily routine. So at the point where you're like, I'd really love to wake up next to somebody and do blank and blank together. And then I'd love to work, and then we meet for dinner, and then we, take the dog for a walk, or take kids out, or whatever it happens to be, take a trip, or do it. One has to be in the mindset of wanting to do couple-like things. Yeah. People, and a lot of people don't think about it that way. They either fall into something, or they don't see the benefits of coupling up. I think that the pandemic tuned people's awareness to the fact that some things are indeed easier on your own. Depends on finances, et cetera, but a lot of things are made better done with other people.